So, hi everyone, and welcome to another Zoom meeting with the Facebook group, of course, in Miracles with Keith. If anyone's watching us afterwards, the recording on YouTube, and wants to join the Facebook group, make sure you answer the question that says you accept the rules, because that's important in terms of getting accepted into the group. So we will go with our normal format, which is that we'll do a little reading from the Blue Book, and then afterwards we'll have a chat and some questions. So we've been spending the last number of weeks reading through the What It Says at the beginning of the book. And last week we did a review on special relationships, and we also did one on the body and sickness. So this week, we're actually moving into the last section of What It Says, finally. And this one has to do with vision and forgiveness. So that's where we're taking up this week. I can't give you a page number because I'm on my Kindle. If anyone knows the page number from the Blue Book, put it in the chat maybe for anyone who wants to follow along.
That would be good if someone has the page number. I'd really appreciate it.
Cool. All right, so let's...
I've got the page, so I'll put it in.
Lovely. Okay, so if I can just ask, and in case you have any interruptions or anything, can I just ask everyone to mute themselves, except my lovely assistant, Eli. All right, so let's have a read through this last section on vision and forgiveness. So the opposite of seeing through the body's eyes is the vision of Christ, which reflects strength rather than weakness, unity rather than separation, and love rather than fear. So what the ego wants us to do is to see through the body's eyes. Because the ego has projected this world of separation, sin, guilt, and fear. And so all that your body's eyes and your body's ears tell you is about separateness. It talks about all the separate bodies. No God here. All the different opposing wills, all the separate conflicting interests in the world. And so this is what the body's eyes show us. And then Jesus is saying here that the opposite of what the body's eyes show us, which is nothing but sin, guilt, and separation, is Christ's vision. So when we talk about Christ's vision, this is not something you see with the body's eyes. This is about when you return back to being a mind. And it reflects strength rather than weakness, unity rather than separation, and love rather than fear. So the only thing Christ's vision shows is Christ. That's the unity. Christ's vision sees only Christ. The body's eyes, shows other bodies. Christ's vision just shows Christ. That's all it sees. All it sees is itself. And so the opposite of hearing through the body's ears is communication through the voice for God, the Holy Spirit, which abides in each of us. His voice seems distant and difficult to hear because the ego, which speaks for the little, separated self, seems to be much louder. So we need to be clear here. When Jesus talks about the little, separated self, he's talking about Keith. He's talking about all the things I like and don't like and want and don't want and think is good and think is bad. That's what he's talking about. So the insane voice constantly talking to itself in my mind that I identify with, that's the little self that Jesus is talking about. I mean, if we're really to understand the Course, we have to understand, what it's saying is, yes, there is an insane voice talking to itself in your head, and you're not that. You're choosing to be that. You have defaulted to that setting. But there's a different voice. And we don't get to hear the different voice until we choose against the personal voice. My interests, what I want, what I need, my life. So that's what Jesus means when he talks about the little separated self. He's talking about Keith, the movie character that thinks it's in the movie, thinks it knows what it wants and what's good for it. Wants the Holy Spirit to come into the movie with me as a movie character and make my movie happier. And that would make me very happy, because I would have triumphed over God. I, as an ego, would have thrown heaven in God's face, rejected his love, rebelled against his oneness. I projected a crazy movie of separateness, and I identified myself in with all the movie characters. And if it works, then that's great. I've triumphed over God. I threw heaven away and I am happy. And I would like the Holy Spirit to help me do that. And if we're honest with ourselves, that's exactly what we want the Holy Spirit to do. So Jesus is differentiating the two voices in our head. But just to be clear, when he talks about this little separated self, he's talking about the you that you think you are. I put a post into the group today from Byron Katie, and she says, if you believe that you are the me that you think you are, that you imagine yourself to be, you'll believe anything. And that's what she's talking about, this little separated self, that's not what you are, but you're absolutely invested in it, the same as the rest of us. And the whole Course is simply saying, yeah, that's not what you are. It's what you're choosing to be. And when you're ready, when the fear subsides, you can choose to be something different. Mm. Okay, so after saying that the voice of the Holy Spirit seems distant and difficult to hear because of the ego, Jesus says this is actually reversed. The Holy Spirit speaks with unmistakable clarity and overwhelming appeal. No one who does not choose to identify with the body could possibly be deaf to his messages of release and hope, nor could he fail to accept joyously the vision of Christ in glad exchange for his miserable picture of himself. So the clincher there is no one who does not choose to identify with the body. No one who does not choose to identify with the little separated self, with Keith, and with this particular body, this movie character. So my body is a movie character, and the thoughts in my head are a movie script, and it's all in a movie that was over long, long ago. Okay. Christ's vision is the Holy Spirit's gift, God's alternative to the illusion of separation and to the belief in the reality of sin, guilt, and death. Now, again, your eyes and ears are going to show you a world of sin, guilt, and death. However, as a mind, you are capable of seeing beyond that illusion to the truth, which is the oneness, which is the Holy Spirit that's in everything. When I'm being a little separated self, and believing that's what I am. You know, countries attacking other countries, people getting bombed, people dying. This is awful stuff for movie characters. It's a very serious business. And ultimately, Christ's vision shows us something different. You know, ultimately, in the same way that I'm not this body and I'm not this insane voice talking to itself, neither is anyone else. So what we're really watching is like, you know, a movie, which is the atonement in slow motion. There was this thought of separateness, and, you know, it culminated in the projection out of a physical world. It's the projection of the thought of separateness, sin, guilt, and fear in the mind. And and then what happens is we imagine ourselves in the characters that we've imagined. So we like hold these thoughts in our mind of like a world and bodies, and we project it outside of our mind, which you can't, but we think we have. And then what we do is we sort of like identify ourselves in with the actual movie characters. So God's son is not a movie character. None of the movie characters are God's son, but, you know, a deluded God's son with a split mind is identifying with the movie characters that he wrote, but he's not the movie characters. So if we're looking with Christ's vision, ultimately, you know, attack and war and famine and death is happening to movie characters, but it's not happening to God's son. So Christ's vision sees only Christ. It sees only itself. So the ultimate expression of Christ's vision would be ultimately Christ seeing everything that's happening as just an imagining of himself. It's all of it is Christ, but he's none of it. So all the movie characters, Christ is just imagining himself to be them because he has this split mind temporarily. But he's not any of them. So from the point of a little separated self, it seems like people die. But how could what's not born die? So what's not born can't die. Christ isn't born. Like God, Christ just is. So the fact that we're somewhat deluded at the moment and having a fragmented experience as dream characters weren't born and dream characters won't die. The real message of this course is that nobody's a dream character. Dream characters aren't real. There's only Christ. So really, we just, you know, we have a world full of we have a world full of Christ, not yet realized. Everyone is Christ, probably not yet realized. It doesn't change the fact that they're Christ. Christ's vision would show me that they're Christ, not a movie character. It is the one correction for all errors of perception, the reconciliation of the seeming opposites on which this world is based. Seeming opposites. It's a movie. You know, if we go to see a movie about unicorns, it doesn't make unicorns true. Or if I make a movie about unicorns and I sit in the audience imagining I'm in the movie, it doesn't make unicorns true. So there are no opposites. Its kindly light shows all things from another point of view, reflecting the thought system that arises from knowledge and making return to God not only possible, but inevitable. You know, Jesus says in the Course, make this year different by making everything the same. That's what we do. And when we've done that, the return to God is inevitable. Now, in order to get there, forgiveness is looking at the fact that you don't want to do that. You don't want to see everyone as the same, and forgiving yourself for it. And that will undo it. What was regarded as injustice done to one by someone else now becomes a call for help and for union. Sin, sickness, and attack are seen as misperceptions, calling for remedy through gentleness and love. So if I've chosen against my ego and I'm joined with the Holy Spirit, I'm in touch with my identity as Christ. You know, the memory of the fact that I'm Christ, which is as good as it gets in consciousness. And within that memory, I'm untouchable because I'm not the body and I'm not the little separated self, the little I. I am that which is in everything. And that's invulnerability. And so if I know myself as this, what this is can't be attacked. So Christ's vision would be me as Christ, seeing Christ everywhere and watching two movie characters where one seems to be attacking the other. But what does it have to do with me? Defenses are laid down because there is no attack, there is no need for them. So again, we only defend illusions. Anything you feel an impulse to defend is an illusion. Because that place of love, light, and truth in my mind, that is the Holy Spirit and my identity there, needs no defense. Can't die because it wasn't born. That space just wants to extend love. It doesn't need love. It's complete wholeness. It needs nothing external to itself. It wants only to extend the love and light from there out into the world. But it doesn't need the world to comply in any way whatsoever. There's no requirements of the movie. That was, you know, it's already in the can, it's shot. Our brothers' needs become our own because they are taking the journey with us as we go to God. Without us, they would lose their way. Without them, we could never find our own. So as a mind, as the one split mind, we couldn't look at the guilt within us for destroying heaven. You see, people always think, well, that sounds a bit bizarre. Like, you know, why would we think we destroyed heaven? The thing is, if you are a separate self, heaven is destroyed. It's, you know, either there's heaven's oneness or there's me. But if there's a me, there's no heaven's oneness. God's oneness was destroyed. And so that's, you know, as long as the mind believes it's a separate me, a little separated self, it does mean the guilt has to be there for destroying heaven. And so the solution to the, you know, horrific guilt in the mind was to project out a world of where we could see outside of our mind evil and sin and guilt and punishment and attack and defense and separateness and pain and death. So the thing we couldn't look at inside of ourselves, we projected it out into the world. So our secret sin and hidden hate got projected out onto the movie. And now, rather than seeing the guilt inside of me, I have, I'm going to pick movie characters who cannot be guilty because they're only movie characters, but I'm going to make them real. I'm going to make egos real. I'm going to make separate bodies real. I'm going to make the movie of the world real. And I'm going to take it very seriously. And I'm going to sit in judgment of all the evil that I see there in the movie. But that's all the evil that I think is inside me. That was the purpose of the world. So why is Jesus saying that we need our brothers and without them we cannot return to God? Because all the guilt in my mind that I have refused to look at and buried is out there in the world. That's where it is. So the ingeniousness of the Holy Spirit's atonement is that the guilt that I will not look at and that I have separated myself from and dissociated from and no longer have access to, and so it can't be undone, is going to come up in terms of my reactions and judgments of movie characters. So a movie character is going to come up and it's going to mug me. The movie character is going to come up and mug my movie character that I'm insanely identifying with. And what I'm going to do then is, this is perfect for me, to see my attack on God, not in me, but in this attacker. This is the bad person. This is the sinner. This is the person God needs to smite. This is the person that's going to make me look good in front of God. So that's the purpose of it. That's the purpose of why there was one of us and we splintered ourselves into trillions of us. It was because we could all see our own guilt in everyone else. So how do we undo our guilt? By recognizing it in our judgments of the movie characters. Because again, a movie character, the ego is not real. Christ's vision would simply show me Christ everywhere, despite the movie. It's only my little separated self that wants to make all the other little separated selves real. Then I believe people can be born and people can die. And people can attack me and I need to defend against that and attack them in return. And that's the ego's madness. So ultimately, there's no returning to God until we have seen all our brothers as Christ and not little separated selves. There's no returning to God until we no longer believe in movie characters. So that's the crucial thing. And, and we're all interdependent on each other. We're all projecting our secret sins and hidden hates onto everyone else in the world. There's a script where people will keep attacking each other. And even when we find ourselves in a situation where we're not being attacked, we'll imagine we're being attacked just so we can get rid of our guilt. And so, nobody in this world actually knows me, and nobody in this world actually knows you. All they know is their projections onto you. We're all just here to be screens for each other. In order to project our own secret sins and hidden hates out. And it's only by forgiving our brothers that we can ultimately forgive ourselves, because our guilt is out there in the movie. Forgiveness is unknown in heaven, where the need for it would be inconceivable. Jesus tells us in the Course, God has never forgiven, because forgiveness is the correction for judgment, and God's never judged. However, in this world, forgiveness is a necessary correction for all the mistakes that we have made. You know, earlier on in this section, Jesus talked about forgiveness as, you know, looking beyond. So we're looking beyond movie characters to the Christ in everyone. To offer forgiveness is the only way for us to have it, for it reflects the law of heaven, that giving and receiving are the same. Why is giving and receiving the same? Because it's all Christ. There's just one of us. So any brother I forgive, I'm just forgiving myself. And any brother whose sins I retain, I'm just retaining my own. Heaven is the natural state of all the sons of God as he created them, which means there's no sons of God, there's a son of God. Such is their reality forever. It has not changed because it has been forgotten. There's that, you know, ubiquitous idea from the Course that not one note in Heaven's symphony was missed. Nothing has changed in heaven. Forgiveness is the means by which we will remember. Through forgiveness, the thinking of the world is reversed. And of course, the thinking of the world is separation, sin, guilt, and fear. The forgiven world becomes the gate of heaven, because by its mercy, we can at last forgive ourselves. Now, again, this was something we were dealing with in the group during the week. It is not the purpose of the Course that we escape the world. That's not the purpose of the Course. The purpose of the Course is a happy dream. So that's what Jesus is talking about when he talks about the forgiven world becomes the gateway to heaven. We can't skip steps. We can't just jump back into heaven. We have to forgive the world. We have to see it utterly blameless, harmless, meaningless. So there's no escaping the dream. The only escape of the dream is when you don't need to escape the dream, because it's a happy dream. And that means forgiving everything. Now, you couldn't possibly forgive everything as a body. How would you forgive mass murderers? You know, how would you forgive, you know, cancer in children? You know, how could you forgive any of that as a body? And you can't. A movie character can't forgive that, because a movie character thinks they're in the movie. But nobody's in the movie. You know, in the Course, Jesus says to us, all things work together for good, except in the ego's opinion. Now think about that. All things work together for good. That's the atonement. you know, what you are is a mind. And, and all of the bodies and the world is the thoughts that you're holding in your mind. And they're resolving themselves. You know, there was originally just one thought of separateness from God, and the Holy Spirit went in and undid it. That's the atonement. There's no separation possible. God has no opposite. And so, you know, with the entire world, it's all you. It's the contents of your mind. It's your inner mind. It's all the thoughts of separateness in your mind resolving themselves. It's the Holy Spirit's atonement happening slowly. That's why all things work together for good. All the war and the famine and the awfulness and everything. All the different parts are just working on bringing each other to the atonement. So the forgiven world becomes the gate of heaven. Not the escaped world, the forgiven world, because by its mercy, we can at last forgive ourselves. Because all the guilt in the world is ours. We put the world there so we could see our own guilt outside of ourselves. And this comes back to a really important point, which is that, you know, the tiny mad idea was never a problem. It was that we remembered not to laugh at it. So, I mean, getting to the forgiven world is where we remember to laugh. And that means even, you know, and that's why Jesus, you know, does the very shocking passage in the Course where he talks about how we'll laugh at famine and we'll laugh at war and we'll laugh at death and we'll laugh at all of these things. Because it's a movie. Nobody's been born. Nobody can die. What you are is a mind that's imagining all these things. So holding no one prisoner to guilt, we become free. So holding none of your dream figures as guilty is undoing your own guilt, because that's where you hid it. Acknowledging Christ in all our brothers, we recognize his presence in ourselves. So there's not trillions of Christs, there's one Christ. And so in terms of the entire dream world, you know, all of it is Christ, but he's none of it. Everything in the dream world, because it's in our mind, our split mind, it has the thought system of the ego and the thought system of the Holy Spirit in it. And depending on which of your own minds you're in, it will actually create what you see. If you're in your personal little separated mind, you'll see other little separated minds and think they're real, think they've been born and think they can die. If you're in your Christ mind, if you're in your Holy Spirit mind, you see only the Holy Spirit. So again, Christ's vision doesn't mean we stop seeing through our eyes or hearing through our ears. It doesn't mean that our senses will suddenly stop lying to us. You know, our senses are still going to show us the same things. Separate bodies, good people and bad people, you know, beautiful and ugly. It's just that we're not going to believe it. It's a dream. It's a movie. So we're not asked to stop seeing the movie. We're asked to see Christ in all the movie characters. Just because they temporarily think they're a movie character doesn't mean they're not Christ. And only my movie character could be upset with them. Not what I am when I join with the Holy Spirit. That's invulnerable. Forgetting all our misperceptions, and with nothing from the past to hold us back, we can remember God. Beyond this, learning cannot go. When we are ready, God himself will take the final step in our return to him. So as we've said many times in the group and in our Zoom meetings, Jesus says God takes the final step to undo consciousness, which is individual identity. But he also says in the course that God doesn't take steps because there's nothing to be done about a separation that's never happened. And so we could take this as Jesus being metaphorical, as he's wont to do. And he's simply telling us that it's automatic. The undoing of consciousness, again, the awakening from the dream, that's not a step we can take. So that's not something that we concern ourselves with. Our whole concern is about having a happy dream. It's about letting the movie play and being completely invulnerable to it, just extending love to it. It's all you and you're none of it. The other interesting, I read Liz Cronkite actually say that her thoughts on it was the reason why Jesus says that God takes the final step is because everything is done except God, which I thought was interesting. And I kind of think it's true. Because with the undoing of consciousness, it's the undoing of what's not God. There's only God left. Okay, so I've been chatting loads. So I think we will throw it open to questions.
Okay, Keith, for questions, there's one she asked directly to me, but I've asked her if she'd like me to ask you.
Sure.
And it's from, I can't see her full name, just a minute. Kirsty Randall. She asks, if one Course in Miracles student's experience of the journey is far more dramatic or gruesome than another, does that mean the guilt is greater in that mind than the other?
There's just one mind.
Yeah.
There's just one mind. One of the things, you know, because we'll never quite make sense of A Course in Miracles as long as we think about it as movie characters. It will never make sense as long as I'm thinking about it in my personal mind and thinking I'm a body and thinking I'm a self, a little separated self. The Course is never going to make sense. So there is, there's only Christ. Everything that's happening is just, you know, thoughts in the mind being undone by the Holy Spirit. So that's what appears to be happening in the world, but it's happening in the mind. And actually, it's already over. Like the atonement was over straight away. Concepts
so
like this.
That would be, hopefully this is going to help Kirsty, but there is only one mind. So it's not like Keith over there or Kirsty over there or Eli sitting here has more guilt than each other sort of thing. Is that kind of saying that because there's only one mind, there's really only one guilt, which is ego. There's only one ego. Is that not correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's only one ego. And there's only one Holy Spirit.
Yes. Okay.
In the one split mind. So as we undo layers of illusion, there's just one mind. We all, as movie characters, just remember ourselves as the same one mind. For as long as I appear to be in the world, let's say at the very top of the ladder, I wouldn't identify any more with my body than I would with yours, Eli. That's what we would get to. Now, there's none of us can jump to that, but ultimately, you would simply at that point, I would not see myself as, I wouldn't be identified as a body. And I wouldn't, the idea of a self or another would not exist. That's the top of the ladder. There's no such thing as a self and there's no such thing as another.
Would that go along with there's no hierarchy of illusions?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the first miracle principle, there's no order of difficulties in miracles. It's all a movie. So in the movie, Eli might be a mass murderer and Dee might be like, a holy saint that's having visions of Jesus and Mary and the whole thing. There's no order of difficulty in miracles because it's just a movie of Eli and a movie of Dee. There's no holy people and unholy people. Everyone's you as a split mind. So if we think of ourselves as a split mind, everyone is you.
And Kirsty continues with, she says, my question is, why does it seem to be this way? And she says her sound is off and that's why she's sending me messages to ask you.
I'm presuming she means, why does it seem like there's differences?
Yeah,
because as a split mind, we couldn't deal with the guilt inside of us for being separate from God. And so, Jesus says the world rose from the guilt to keep the guilt hidden. There is no opposites in truth, but once we believe that we're separate from God, now there's opposites. There's me and God. There's oneness and separateness. And so that thought of separateness is like projected out into the world. And so the ego made a movie that we could watch that would show us separateness, that would show us differences. So why do we see it? Because the ego put it there. The ego made the movie to show us how real separateness is and how different everything is. There's no sameness, there's no oneness. So that's why it seems that way, because that's exactly how the ego wanted it to look in its movie, which is the opposite of heaven. So if heaven is oneness, then the movie is all about differences. So again, Jesus tells us there's nothing so blinding as perception of form. So you never want to look at form and make any assumptions whatsoever from form, even in terms of who's guilty, who's not guilty, who's got the most guilt, who hasn't. I mean, if you want to use that criterion, Jesus had a barbaric, long drawn out, horrific death where people hated him and spat at him and called for his blood. And, he was, whipped with a cat o' nine tails that ripped the flesh from his back. And, he was put on a cross so he would slowly suffocate to death. I mean, so if that was anyone else, you go, you could make the mistake of going, that was their guilt, so they had to experience themselves as the innocent victim. But that wasn't true of Jesus. So we can make no assumptions from form. And again, form isn't true. That's what we really need to get into our head. We want form to be true. We want to make it true, but form's not true. Hope that makes sense.
As her reply is, oh, I see. So,
Okay.
I think what you're saying is working for her.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So
Anyone
with
else?
that,
Yeah.
I always felt, and please correct me if I'm feeling it all wrong, is that this is my script that I signed up for it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? And so, yeah, with the hell that I sometimes have to face, I always feel like I signed up for this as and specifically for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like the hell I have to go through that's my ticket home. If I can do the forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yes. I think it's a very helpful way to see it.
Yeah.
I think it's a very helpful way to see it. It does presuppose that there is this Eli ghost.
Yes.
Existing in the split mind that's going, oh, let me get this sorted. Let me get my salvation on. I mean, the truth is there's just one mind. And so the only part of us, so the movie character is not true. We keep thinking we're the movie character, and we keep identifying with the movie character. And, that's why we have like a belief in like afterlife and stuff like that, because we think we're the movie character. We think we're a body. We think we're a little separated self, but we're not. So yes, Eli, I think that's a very helpful way of seeing it. I think it's a very useful way of seeing it, and it's how I would tend to see it. It's no harm in keeping the metaphysics in mind, though, which is this, as we go back up the ladder, there's just one of us, and there only ever was one of us. So, people can be attached to the idea of past lives and future lives. And I used to be very attached to that idea myself. I must say it's something I don't feel the need to attach to anymore. Because again, it's presupposing that there's all these little separated selves. It's really, the belief in reincarnation is really just an attempt to immortalize the little separated self, that it'll just keep coming back in different vehicles, but there are no little separated selves. There's only Christ. But again, I know people don't like when I make level 1 statements like that. It gets me into trouble constantly. But I think on a level 2, I think it's useful to understand that, we are watching a movie of the world, and, we've chosen the scenes that we want to watch. Yes, I think that's a very helpful way of seeing it.
Anyone else have any questions they'd like, or anything they'd like to share with all of us? You can just raise your hand. Go ahead, Marcia. Marcia?
It's actually Marcia, but I like
Oh,
Marcia.
really? I got it wrong for ages. Marcia.
People across the pond say Marcia.
Ah, okay.
And in the US, it's Marcia. So it doesn't matter. I like both of them. Well, they're not real. So on the idea of past lives, what you were just talking about, time has all happened at once. And so these are what we think of as past lives. They're just splits. And it doesn't matter if we were in ancient Egypt or in India, and didn't you say something about being in China in 1600s? I mean, none of that's
yes.
I mean, I'm not making any sense. I
get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. You see, it's all just a movie that's already over.
Yeah. I'm not arguing with it.
I agree with you. No. And I think, what I want to say in response to it is, if you want to know what your past lives were, everyone, at the deepest level of truth, all of your past lives is everything that's ever lived. All the plants, all the trees, all the animals, and all the people. If you go
Our
all the way back,
ancestors.
absolutely, all
Yeah.
of it's you. It, you know, because we can talk about reincarnation, but
Yeah,
we can't do that without making the lie real. We're saying there's separateness, there's individuation, there's you know, there's a physical world, and there's a spirit world. We're saying there's this life and there's that life. We're saying there's this
Yeah.
degree of separation and there's that degree of separation.
Right.
Right. You know, and I can talk about this life or my previous life. I can talk about my future life. And it's all a lie. Now, it's a very useful lie, and it'll take you home. There's nothing to stop you holding on to that and using that as part of your spiritual practice. The Holy Spirit uses everything. But if we really, really want to understand the metaphysics of the Course, it's understanding that, you know, you as the one split mind imagined yourself as all of it.
Right.
So that's really what our past lives is, everything. And even our
And
future lives, our past lives, because it's already over.
And everything that we're called upon to forgive in this so-called life, it already happened in so-called other lifetimes. Like, you know, like that Christy was asking about why some people have more tragic lives and others, you know, seem to not suffer. But the thing is, nobody gets off the hook. We all have had tragic, you know, and so at some point, like what Eli was saying, we've chosen in our right mind the path home. And so we're choosing now to use our unforgiveness scripts to bring us back. We're doing it in our right mind, which I was thinking about last night. I'm the decision maker. If you don't mind, would you go into that a little bit? Like, who the heck is the decision maker? I mean, there's a split mind, right?
Yeah.
And so I know it's all of us, but would you just pontificate? Well, elucidate, not pontificate, a little bit about the decision maker. Thank you.
I mean, look, this is a very controversial term. Ken Wapnick coined the term in a particular context, which we'll discuss, but it's not used like that in the Course. It's only used once in the Course.
Right, right.
And it's to do with the body. It's not the same mechanism at all that we're talking about here, right? It's just saying the body is not a decision maker. That was the only reference in the Course.
But who's doing the choosing? Excuse me, who's doing the choosing? They used to call him Charlie the Chooser, and then he became the big blue dot, you know, with Ken.
Yeah. So again, Jesus doesn't use that term at all in the Course.
Right.
However, although it's not explicit in the Course, it's absolutely implicit in the sense that he keeps saying, you know, the ego will tell you this, the ego is going to believe this, the Holy Spirit can teach you this. Okay, so you know, the ego is just a thought system of separateness and sin, guilt, and fear, and the Holy Spirit is merely a thought system which says, no, all that's not true. There's just oneness. So, you know, we can think about the decision maker being the Son of God or the dreamer of the dream. And as the dreamer of the dream, he can imagine himself into a movie character, which is the ego thought system. Or he can choose against being a movie character. And if he does that, he'll experience himself as a non-judgmental witness with the Holy Spirit. Because again, forgiveness is simply looking at the ego without judging it. So
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, okay. So, you know, we just look at people and most of us are in that thought stream of the ego. And, you know, most of us aren't even thinking about choosing a right mind, so how do we finally get into that pool where that pool of awareness somehow, where we've made that choice. How do we make that choice if we're in the ego?
So
if we're in the ego, we're not in the Holy Spirit. The Holy
Yeah.
Spirit has no desire. I mean, the ego has no desire to forgive or be enlightened.
no,
I don't-
no.
Go ahead.
And so Jesus says that the highest thinking the ego is capable of is there must be a better way. So it's the suffering that's created by being in the ego mind. It's the suffering that's created by thinking I'm a little separated self and that the other little separated selves are out to get me. And I need to be constantly on my defense and angry and judgmental. So it's,
Mhm. As proof that the Holy Spirit is in our mind, at some point, that thought, there must be a better way, opens that door for the Holy Spirit to come rushing in.
Yeah, that's exactly what Jesus says.
It's thought of as a decision that we made, but the ego would never make that decision. But you just clarified it by saying that the highest thought of the ego would be, this sucks, there must be a better way.
Yeah.
But even that doesn't sound like something the ego would even think of. So that kind of just proves that in the background, the Holy Spirit is always. Then we just have an inkling that there's a better way. And then
Jesus calls it the invitation to the Holy Spirit when we reach a point of suffering. Because again, Jesus says, tolerance for suffering is high, but it's not without limit. Eventually, there comes a point where everyone says there must be another way. And you see, to know the other way, what we have to do is we have to first of all decide our way is wrong.
Right.
And so really we're just, there's that sense of being open to seeing it differently. So that's the invitation to the Holy Spirit. So that's how all the dream characters realize that they're the one split mind.
It's an invitation to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, when the suffering gets too great, because there's no suffering in the Holy Spirit mind. There's no suffering in the right mind.
But it seems to take forever. It seems to take forever. I mean,
yeah, but says the movie character.
Make up our mind.
Yeah, but it says the movie character. There's only now. There's only now.
Yeah.
Everything that seems to be the past and the future is just, it's a movie. There's just now. What you are is outside of time and space, watching a movie of time and space. So it doesn't take time at all. It's there is no time. It's very simple. It's stop thinking you're a separate self. Stop defending a separate self that doesn't exist. Let it all go and let something else be there in your mind, which sees itself in everyone. So it's very simple. That's what you do. But you see, our fear is horrific of not being a separate self. Like, all I have to do is choose against being Keith. I am everything that's unfolding, and everything that's unfolding is me, and I'm none of it. I haven't been born and I won't die. I am, this non-judgmental witness with Jesus in the cinema. That's my identity. Let me just stay there. That's it. That's the end of the journey. Once you can look at the movie and don't judge any of it, once there's no judgment for any single movie character left, then the ego is undone. Guilt is undone. The ego is undone. And we're in the happy dream. And then shortly after that, the dream itself is undone.
And all it takes is a little willingness, as Jesus says.
Yeah, because you're not asked
and the
to
Holy
fight
Spirit will use that.
Yeah, because you're not asked to fight your ego. You're not asked to choose against your ego. You're not asked to suffocate your ego or stifle your ego or shout over your ego or shout it down. None of that. All you're asked to do is look at your ego without judging it.
Okay,
that's it.
That's okay. Thank you.
That's the whole of it. You look at your ego without judging it. And because that's the whole of it. you do that. And so, you know, and so what that means is, it doesn't mean that you have to be without your grievances. It doesn't mean you have to be without your judgments. I mean, you know, go ahead with your grievances and your judgments, but look at yourself wanting them instead of God, and don't judge yourself for it.
That's it.
And that will undo them. So that's the magic. That's the magic formula. Is it's not about letting your grievances go. You don't want to let them go. What you want to do is forgive. Look at yourself, choosing them instead of God, and forgive yourself for it, and that will undo them. But as soon as we try fighting the ego, all we do is strengthen it. You know, the ego is not real. If we fight it, we make it real for ourselves. So again, the tiny mad idea is not the problem. We remembered not to laugh at the tiny mad idea. You know, we took it very seriously. It was a tiny mad idea of separation from God. We took it very seriously. It was a very serious business. We called it sinful. Yeah. You know, we destroyed heaven. You know, we've upset God. We've killed God. And he's going to come back and his retribution is going to be horrific. And this was an awful thing that we did. And we need to hide in a world so he can't find us. And we can't look at our guilt because it's too awful. So we need to project out a movie, and we need to put all our guilt into movie characters and not see it in ourselves. And so, again, that's the tiny mad idea. And the only thing Jesus is saying to us in the chorus is, will you look at the tiny mad idea? Will you finally laugh? Mm-hmm. So we want to look at our silly decision to be a separate self instead of having God, and forgive ourselves for it. And that will undo it. But everyone fights their ego. Everyone thinks, no, I have to achieve this in the future. This is going to be hard work. And all of that takes you completely off the path. All you ever do in the present moment is look without judgment. Because what you are is that which looks without judgment. There's nothing else to be than that which looks without judgment. That's the whole of it.
Okay, Keith, we have quite a few questions in the chat, and we've got Julie with her hand up. I'm going to try and do it in order. I'll do a couple of the questions from the chat, and then we'll go to Julie.
Thanks, Eli.
So the first one was from Keith. He says, is not believing something in the world the same as giving it a holy purpose?
Is not believing something in the world the same as giving it a holy purpose? Well, I hope I can answer that. I'm not quite sure how to interpret the question, but I'm going to answer it this way. The world had a purpose for the ego, which was to make separation, sin, guilt, and fear look real. So that was the ego's purpose for the world. And really, the Holy Spirit's purpose for the world is as a classroom where we learn there's no world. So the ego wanted this to be like a prison where sin, guilt, and fear is true forever, and everything would show us that. And the Holy Spirit wants to use it to completely reinterpret that. So again, the ego, it's about making sin real. The Holy Spirit wants to use it to show us that sin's not real. If you take the guilt off the movie character and look at it in yourself instead, where it started off, then if we look at that with the Holy Spirit shows us that the guilt's not in us either. It's illusory because the separation never actually happened. But you see, we can never undo the illusory guilt about the destruction of heaven. We can never undo that as long as we're making separation real. So little by little, we're undoing our belief in separation. As long as we make guilt real. So little by little, we're undoing our belief in guilt. So the Holy Spirit's purpose for the world is as a classroom where we see our guilt coming up, we see our judgment coming up and go, aha, that's what I need to undo. So the Holy Spirit needs everything that's happening in the world. Now, the Holy Spirit is not making things happen in the world. The ego wrote the script, but the Holy Spirit needs that script because that's the only way to see your guilt. It's the only way to undo it is to see it in the movie characters. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay, and the next is from Cindy. It says, the ego is sticking this thought in my mind that returning to one mind sounds boring and lonely, and I often get stuck when I think of the idea of heaven. It always leaves me asking, then what? And she would love something to help her release this false perception.
Well, your happiness in this world is defined only by your unhappiness. So anything the ego thinks makes it happy. It's really all it is a temporary reprieve from misery. So there's no actual happiness as a separate self. There's just degrees of misery. And so a huge amount of our existence is just felt, you know, as numb and empty. And sometimes downright traumatic and awful and painful and gut-wrenching. And then we get these temporary reprieves where we have a glimpse of happiness, but it never lasts. And so, you know, there's nothing in this world. Again, I'm going to say, you know, what you need to do is you need to follow the forgiveness process until you have one moment in the holy instant where you have an experience of love. And once you've had that, nothing else in the world will ever come close to that. Nothing else will give it to you. That experience of love in the mind. Once you've had that, you do actually realize that the world is crap by comparison. And if I've had that, anyone can have that. And I've seen so many people have that experience by just sticking with the forgiveness process. You will at some point have an experience of love that will bring you to your knees. You know, you'll weep. You'll weep for days afterwards. And when you've done that, you can never fool yourself that there's happiness in the world ever again. There's not. It's just degrees of misery. And when I'm talking about that, that's not even God's love. That's just the memory of it, the Holy Spirit. So just persist with your forgiveness. Again, well, let me try and think of a good analogy or a metaphor here. I don't know, imagine there's like a kid that's like brought up by, I don't know, insane parents, and they stitch a mask onto her face, and she grows up and always looks in the mirror and sees this particular appearance and just becomes familiar with this is what she is and just gets used to it. And her parents wear masks and she doesn't see anyone else, so she just assumes this is normal. And imagine then there's an intervention by social services and they come to the house and they're going to now take the mask off the child's face. The child will be terrified. This would be like the most terrifying thing in the world. You're going to take my face. And so, I don't know, it's a bit of a funny metaphor that came into my mind, but ultimately we're like these separate, we're thinking we're separate selves, and we're horrified at the idea of relinquishing them, but we've never been them. What you are is the mind that's one mind that's projecting the whole thing. It's not like we ever were any of the separated selves. It's just a dream. But again, now that we've identified as the separate self, it's like someone's trying to take our face off. It's like, my God, it would be my death. But you've never been the movie character. You're terrified of losing what you've never been. Don't know, hope that metaphor works on some level.
Okay, let's go to Julie. You had your hand up and it's down now. So was your question answered?
It's yeah. It's just that I have to go, so I might have time to ask my question, but no time to listen to the answer live. So I thought I would just coming back next week to ask the question, because it's an ongoing, very deep thing. So
You want to save
yeah.
it then for next week?
Yes, or the next time. Thank you, though. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful.
Okay.
Thanks, Julie.
Next in the chat, we have Alana, if I'm saying it correctly, and I apologize if I'm not. But she asks if it's right to say that the happy dream is simply the realization that this is just a dream. Is that the
Yes.
happy dream?
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
100%. Yeah. It's like Jesus has a passage in the course. Let me see if I can dig it out. If I can find it happily, I will. I don't know. There's a few there. I put in a search for come and go, and there's loads of results. But Jesus basically has a passage in the course where he says that you would look at the entire world, and you would see the illusion of figures coming and going and being born and dying, and you wouldn't be fooled by any of it. So that's the passage. I'll put it up in the group later on. But ultimately, that's what the happy dream is that you know that none of it's actually real. Nothing was born, so nothing dies.
Okay, we have another. Jolene, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Thanks. Cool. I just wanted to give some feedback because I asked you a question last week that you answered so well, Keith. Thank you. And this week has been profound, like the clarity, the joy and the peace. And I suppose it's what you described earlier on as like Christ's vision. Mm-hmm. It was so clear. The projection that is this dream, the stories, the figures, the characters. Yeah, it's been so real, like it's been so clear. And I feel it kind of like fades a little bit now, and it goes like that. It goes like in waves, right?
It does.
For me, the clarity comes and then I get completely swept away in it. And then it's like, wow. And then it's gone.
Yeah, but you see, I think what you get are moments of clarity, like little mini awakenings, and then you have to integrate it. So it will very often seem like there's like a moment of incredible light, and it'll be followed by like incredible darkness. That's the journey. It's a bit like you have that moment of clarity, and now you've got to use that to work on the darkness that comes up. I don't know. It's a bit like, okay, this is not a perfect analogy, but it's a bit like the Holy Spirit every so often picks you up from where you're at and moves you to a point in the future. And you have this wow moment, and then the Holy Spirit moves you back and goes, work towards that. Now that's not a perfect analogy, but I think it's a helpful analogy.
Yeah, it is. It is. I try to stay here now, because if I think about what's going to happen, I'm like, I know where this is going.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's always that rebound from a moment of light into a moment of darkness. It's just the way everyone experiences the journey that way. And really, it's just our resistance, and all we're ever doing is forgiving ourselves for that resistance, and that will undo it.
Okay, we have question from the chat. So because there is only one mind, is that why there are common movie characters we see and agree are out there in the dream? Example, like Putin, President Biden.
Yeah, but you see, again, you have to be careful what you're asking, because what you're saying is, you know, is that why us movie characters see other movie characters? But you have to all the time remember, it's all you. There's just one mind. You're all of it. So there isn't really agreement. There's agreement by movie characters. There's agreement by little separated selves, but that's kind of irrelevant to the actual truth, which that it's all you.
Okay, and that question was from Ginny.
Very
Or
good.
Ginny. And okay, so next we have Tina, my lovely daughter.
Indeed.
Hi, Mom. Good to see you, Mom. Hi,
Yeah,
Keith.
always good to see
Hi,
you.
Tina.
My question is about guidance, because I know the script is written, but it feels like as a Tina character that I'm making decisions, and I try to tap into the Holy Spirit mind and being non-judgmental and being in the movie theater when I'm making decisions and ask for guidance from the Holy Spirit. And what I try to do is like feel it. I kind of feel if one decision gives me like a happier feeling in my stomach area, and if it seems like it's not going to be on the script, then I get kind of like an icky feeling. I don't know. That's how I do my guidance, and I don't know if that's correct or incorrect.
In terms of how you will experience it, that's correct. But let's just put it into a perspective. There's only one decision, and that's the decision to be a separate self, or to choose against the separate self and join with the Holy Spirit, to be with Jesus as a non-judgmental witness. Of your own ego and everyone else's. So you see, what you are is you're sitting in the movie theater, and you have the choice of being in the of getting sucked into the movie, or you have the choice of listening to Jesus beside you when he says, "What does it have to do with you?" So that's your two choices, and that's the only decision. Now, if you choose to come out of the movie and sit in the movie theater and be beside Jesus, and you make a decision against being the movie character, you let all that go, all my opinions and everything I want and think I want and need and all that sort of thing, and you just connect with Jesus, then there's a different movie scene gets picked from the library and goes in, where Tina in the movie makes good decisions. But you see, again, it's really important to remember, you're not Tina. You know, what you are is what's in the movie theater. And the only decision is, the only decision you can make is to be in the movie theater and which teacher you're listening to. And if you're listening to being like a personal mind, and so you want to be in the movie, then there's particular movie scenes will play. And there'll be scenes of like, you know, guilt and hurt and attack and judgment and defense and all of that. But if you make a decision to be joined with Jesus in the cinema as a non-judgmental witness, then a different video goes on where Tina makes decisions that are to do with forgiveness and love. But again, what the movie character does is kind of like, you're not the movie character. The only decision you ever have to make is to choose against being a personal self, and to join with Jesus as a non-judgmental observer. And if you do that, then the movie character on the screen will feel guidance and make decisions and do, but that's just a movie that's already over. But it's the Holy Spirit's movie. It's the Holy Spirit's movie scene as opposed to the egos. So there's nothing actually happening down here in movie land. It simply reflects a decision that's getting made by the mind in the movie theater. Is that complicated? Does that make sense? See, it always comes back to realizing you're not the movie character. So in terms of having guidance from the Holy Spirit, the only thing you have to do is choose against everything your personal mind is saying, to be a non-judgmental witness of yourself and all the situations. And then because you think you're in the movie, then you will have guidance. But again, you're not going to hear the guidance of the Holy Spirit as long as the voice of specialness is in your mind, as long as the voice of me, as the little separated self, as the little I with my wants and my needs. We have to choose against all of that. But that's a decision made in the mind, and then a movie plays where Tina makes good choices. But it's the only decision is to, you know, Jesus says in the Course, we've only got one problem and there's only one solution. So the only problem is the decision for the ego, and the solution to everything is to choose against the ego for the Holy Spirit. And then the movie scenes are different. And because you think you're here, yeah, there'll be like guidance and everything else, and you'll make good choices that are about undoing your guilt and about extending love. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
That's the question. It really does. It makes me think that Tina's making choices, and it's an ego trick. So if I can forgive that, when I'm a Tina and I think I'm making choices, if I can forgive it, or that's the only choice that helps a lot.
Okay. Is it just my is it just mine, or is this Tina's bad?
It's mine is bad. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay, right. I didn't quite catch that. If you wanted to give it another go.
Sure. So the ego trick is that I'm a Tina and I have decisions to make. But when that comes up in my mind, if I can look at that non-judgmentally with Jesus, then I'm making a choice for God.
Yeah. Look, once you're looking without judgment, you are in the cinema with Jesus. If you're watching Tina without judging her, you're not Tina. You're in the cinema with Jesus. And if that's the case, a movie's going to play in terms of Tina making decisions in a certain way. And you see, because the crucial thing is, in terms of the Holy Spirit telling us what to do, it's not really like the Holy Spirit doesn't tell Keith what to do. When I'm joined with the Holy Spirit, it's a bit like loving an effective action just happens through me. But it's not really Keith. So it's almost like the movie scene just unfolds once I've stepped back from being the Keith movie character. It's a bit like your body is just used in a way that is the most loving and effective way for everyone concerned in the situation. But it's not really anything to do with like a me. It's just the Holy Spirit's movie scene of atonement, forgiveness, and love that gets played. So really, when you have that experience of being joined with the Holy Spirit, it's much more like almost sort of just watching something unfold, which you have no investment in.
That's very helpful, Keith. Thank you.
Because we think like I, Keith, should be having a chat with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit tells me what to do. That's not really the course. It's, you know, I have to realize I'm not Keith. I have this insane voice talking to itself in my mind, and it wants to make the separateness it sees with its eyes and its ears real. But it's really about me choosing against that, choosing against being the little separated self in the body, and allowing something else to take its place, which will be the Holy Spirit. And then something just effortlessly happens through your body, but it's not really like you're doing it. It's kind of like happening through you. Have we anything else, Eli?
Actually, no, I think we're done. You're done.
Wow, very cool.
Hey.
We've reached a natural end.
Yes.
I guess just one way I wanted to wrap things up. So I have said, ultimately, you're every character in the dream is you, but you're not actually any of them, because it is just an imagining of yourself as you're not, as the split mind. And so, you know, so at the highest level, that's what Jesus means when he says, you know, make this different, make this year different by making everything the same. But that's a very high level, and you know, we don't. I don't want to make you sort of fall into the trap of level confusion. The way Ken taught this, you know, as long as we think that we are here in the world, in terms of how you would practically live your life in this way, the way Ken always taught it was that everyone in the world has an ego, and everyone in the world is the Holy Spirit, and they all have a part of their mind deciding which they're going to choose as their identity. And in that sense, everyone here is the same. So, you know, in terms of a practical way that we apply the course, that's how we actually apply it. All of us has an ego which is utterly alone, terrified, self-loathing, you know, frightened by everything, unhappy. Everyone has that. And so there's a terrible pain of separateness in every ego, terrible pain of separateness, the hole that's left there from the apparent loss of God's love, the apparent loss of heaven. And we're all going around as egos, and the only way we know how to make the pain stop is to attack. Now, it doesn't matter whether that's murdering people or whether that's judging someone. But the only way we know how to make the pain of separateness, the pain of being an ego stop, is to attack. You know, so that's two extremes. And there's all this extremes. There's all the, you know, different, you know, it's, even in terms of, you know, you enter a competition with people, and you win the race, and like you're delighted, but you know it's at the expense of everyone that didn't win. It's by, you know, comparing your happiness, you know, to everyone else's misery. You know, ego, again, that's, you know, really it's an attack. Even in that situation where there's sport, it's an attack, so you can feel better about yourself. And everything the ego does is an attack. You know, it constantly, you know, thinks it's being attacked, and therefore is in a constant state of attack itself. So there's just the misery of being a separated self. And then, but inside everyone is the same Holy Spirit. You know, those little moments, those little satori, those moments of clarity, those moments where there's love, those moments where the clouds part and the ego's nightmares and thoughts and fears and hates, where there's a love that shines in there. And so, you know, some people are going, like, everyone spends a different amount of time in being a personal self or being in the Holy Spirit mind. But it's all the same. So everyone is exactly the same. So, you know, it's not necessarily helpful to go around saying everyone is me, but you will get to that if you go around seeing everyone as the same. All the egos are just a movie, and it's the Holy Spirit in behind that. So really, I don't know, it might be more helpful in a pragmatic sense just to everyone is the same, because everyone has an ego which is utterly miserable and attacking, and a Holy Spirit. And really our job is to see beyond the attacking ego to the Holy Spirit and everyone else, because that's the only way for us to know ourselves as the Holy Spirit. So, because ultimately what we teach everyone else is what we learn of ourselves. You know, Jesus is quite clear in the course that, you know, there's no such thing as a thought that's not creative on some level, and that our thoughts do affect other minds. And so, you know, when someone else is in their personal mind and the pain is just horrific and the fear, and all they can do is attack, there's an option then for me in that situation to either say to their mind, yes, you are an attacking ego and you are guilty. And you're not deserving of God's love, and you're not deserving of redemption, and you're different than me. And that's what we all do until we're ready to make a different decision. And the different decision is to look beyond an attacking ego, to see it as a call for love. And see beyond that call for love and see the Holy Spirit in behind that. And that's what we teach their mind. That's what you are. The pain can stop. But really what I'm doing is I'm showing that a different decision is possible by, someone is attacking me, or that's my perception. But I respond with love. I see that as a call for love, and I look for the good in the person behind that. I look for the same Holy Spirit in them that's in me. And that strengthens it in both of us. So I can either make the ego real in them, and then I have to make it real in myself, or I can make the Holy Spirit what's real in them, and then that's what I will know is real in myself. So really, one of the crucial things about the course is making everything the same. So that's how Ken always taught it. Everyone has the same 100% thought system of hate, and the same 100% thought system of forgiveness. And so that's a very practical way to do it. And then it's no harm to understand the higher metaphysics, which is that the reason everyone's the same is because it's all dreams about what you are. And you're not any of those dreams, but they are all ways you are representing yourself in a movie that's already over. Hope that makes sense. Good. So, well, listen, we shall leave it there. So we will stop the recording. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attention. I hope you got something out of today's Zoom meeting. And so I won't be having one next week because it's my big move day. So it'll be 2 weeks' time before we have our next one. So thank you very much, everyone.
Keith. It was so wonderful. Always love listening to you.
Thank you,
Everybody have a good
Keith.
week.
Thank you.
Thank
Everyone
you,
have a good
everybody.
week.
Have a wonderful
Bye,
week.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you.